Good evening and welcome. Trust you all well. Great. While I'm waiting, does anybody have any questions or comments? All good. Thank you, Yasin. I'm just enabling your mics so that
Evening, sir.
good evening, Rajan. Is that Rajan?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. How are you all doing?
Hey, we're busy. We got another assignment due tonight, business management, and we've got one on the 12th.
Shame. You want me to feel sorry for you?
No, you don't look like you feel sorry for us. Don't lie.
Okay. Welcome, anybody. If you got any questions, just unmute and talk to me.
So can I ask?
Yes, go ahead.
Closer to, we're obviously writing on the 21st and the 23rd.
What's on the 21st?
I think entrepreneurship is on the 21st and international business on the 23rd.
Okay.
Closer to that time, will you be willing to assist us in having another class just to do a catch-up session and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, there is one more webinar scheduled for the end of June. So at that webinar, hopefully, if I'm in a good mood, I'll be able to help you all with regard to your preparation for the exam. But yeah, so I don't think it'll be necessary. But if you think you'll need another class in July, I mean, no, sorry, what am I? Yeah, in July, then we'll have to arrange it through student support. I see my colleague has joined me. Welcome.
Hi, Prof. How are you?
Okay, thanks, Emma. Just enable everybody's mics, please.
I've sorted done,
Thank
Prof.
you.
All sorted.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Sorry, Rajan, you were saying?
I said after Liverpool's poor performance, I don't think you will be in a good mood.
Yeah. My mood not so good, especially since the Stormers and the Sharks didn't make it, but the Bulls are still there, so hopefully we'll get some South African teams doing well. And of course,
Green
there's
play.
a World Cup. There's a World Cup, so hey, maybe things to be positive about. Yeah. Okay. Anybody got any questions before we start? Right. I think it's just past 7:30, or is it? No. Still
70, yeah. It's 1 minute after.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me share my screen and then we'll take it from there. So we're talking international business. All right. I trust you can see my screen. And oops. Something is wrong. Yeah, let me go to slideshow. And from the beginning. Okay, there you go. Okay, so if you got a question, please just unmute and talk to me. Otherwise, I may not be able to see your hand. So it's International Business, Bachelor of Commerce, year 3, all you senior students. Right, so hopefully you're in the right webinar. I'm not sure why it's so late. This is way past close to bedtime. I already got my pajamas on. So we'll try and be as quick as possible so you can go to bed. Right, Region Connect for Jobs. You've seen this before. You're required to remind yourself that you have to be familiar with the contents of your module, which is the business environment, managing in a global environment, then all those 4 environments, the social, cultural, legal, political, economic, and technological. the process of going global and global strategy. In the first webinar, we covered the business environment and managing in a global environment. In the last webinar, webinar 2, we looked at the economic and technological environment. Today, we'll look at the socio-cultural and the legal political environment, And then in the last webinar, the process of going global and global strategy. However, that doesn't mean you don't have to go through it yourself. Again, it's the assignment is that thing. We covered some of it in the assignment. So we'll be looking at it, and then we'll be looking at just a few things relating to the exam in the last webinar. So just to recap then, international business or global business is about expanding markets and reaching a global customer base, facilitating transfer of technology, knowledge, and resources between countries. It's a driver of economic growth. It's also a driver of integration. We talked about globalization previously. It's a complex landscape of cultures, markets, and regulatory frameworks. That's why we're looking at all of that. And it's about capitalizing on opportunities in a global economy. So we ask ourselves those 3 questions. Why do we need to go global? And so we talk about the benefits of going global, some of which we talked about here. Then the question is, which markets do we enter, or which countries? And that talks to the political systems, the economic stability, the social, cultural, and technological environment, and more importantly, the cost of doing business given all those things. And then the how, which we'll cover in the last 2 chapters, is the how do we enter into another market or another country? We talk about entry strategies, and there might be one more question, which is when. When refers to the timing of our entry and the timing of our moves. It's nothing more than strategic management, okay? It's like everything else we do, and look at what you've done in Business Management 3 and even in entrepreneurship. It's really a strategy, okay? Going global, going beyond your borders, etc., then talks to all of these things when we have to weigh out the opportunities or recognize the opportunities rather, weigh out the benefits against the risk, doing a cost-benefit analysis, do some serious risk management exercises, do some research, make decisions, etc., resource those decisions. It's about implementing a strategy. So talking about risks, what makes managing a global business more complicated than managing a local business? Again, we have these risks. The one is a cross-cultural risk, where we talk about cultural differences and decision-making styles, etc. Then the country risk, which talks to the political system, unfavorable laws, etc., corruption, government intervention, mismanagement of the economy. Risks, currency risks, exposure to the currency, inflation, transfer pricing, and then what is standard really against any venture would be the commercial risk. How are we going to go? Timing of entry, what is the level of competition, etc., etc. Okay? So these are the risks of global business. So if we start talking firstly about the socio-cultural environment, we want to define culture as a learned behavior, a way of life for one group of people. And it's really, we need to ascertain the importance of this culture in foreign markets. We need to recognize and adjust to the cultural environment. And this is often the difference between success and failure in an international market. So culture, we're not talking about organizational culture, we're talking about the culture of the country, a learned behavior. So It's often seen as the invisible operational system of global business because it dictates how we communicate, make decisions, negotiate, build trust. And again, ignoring these cultural nuances might lead to lost revenue, while mastering that competence, cross-cultural competence, can create competitive advantage. So there's a number of elements of culture. The first is language, which you all know about, verbal, non-verbal communication. Again, this is not critical. You're not going to get a question talking about the elements of culture, but you have to understand how this impacts on doing business. So elements of culture, communication, then religion, and we talk about values and attitudes. Values are basic beliefs or philosophies, and attitudes are feelings of or opinions. And often attitudes are influenced by those values. Then the manners and customs, the elements of culture, the material elements, the things that demonstrate the infrastructure of a society, okay? And then the aesthetics, color, form, music, all that talks to elements of culture. Education is a seriously important element of culture as well. And here's some examples. This is obviously from an American text, but again, the stress in some cultures on different educational specialities like engineering or software development, etc. Also, it could lead higher standards of high levels of education in a society might lead to higher standards of living, if you want, and that too then impacts on the kind of services or goods that you offer to that market. Then social institutions, again, you have the way people in a society relate to one another within group settings. So you have reference groups and you have social stratification. In other words, what does a social pyramid look like? What is the base, if you want, or what is the pinnacle of the social stratification? And is that a market we could serve, or is there an opportunity there, etc.? You might come across Hofstede, Trompena's research regarding countries and regions by culture, and they talk about a number of sort of factors like individualism and collectivism. So an example would be a society that is based on collectivism, then cares for the people. It's about community, it's about Ubuntu, as opposed to individualism where every man for himself or every person for themselves. Then the issue of uncertainty avoidance and how we deal with uncertainty. The time orientation, again, how we deal with time. That's an element of the culture of a society. Trompenaar talks about universalism versus particularism, and then achievement versus ascription. So that's an interesting one, achievement. So when we achieve something or when we gain something, you finish your degree, is it ascribed to something like, hey, this is only God's grace that I've managed to get a degree or a job or something? Or is it about, this is my personal achievement? And even the whole notion of masculinity versus femininity and patriarchism, matriarchism, etc. in countries. Don't worry too much about it. I just thought I'll share some of these with you again from an American textbook about how you appropriate etiquette in having a business meeting in Japan. For example, a slight bow and handshake. You must have a business card. You must give your title and rank, etc. All right. And often you must be referred to business representatives through a third party. You can't just go up and introduce yourself and I'm so and so. Often the introduction is done through a third party. And it's a group orientation rather than an individualistic one, as I spoke just now. In Korea, it's about respect for knowledge and wisdom in elder people. Inwa is about harmony Loyalty is owed to parents and authority figures. Again, elders are respected. And a personal relationship needs to occur before business matters can be discussed. So in certain cultures, you jump straight in and you start talking business. In certain cultures, you might want to get to know the people you're doing business with and then talk business. And interestingly, in China, they call this thing guanxi, which is a system of social networks and influential relationships. But as it says there, exchanges are often uneven. So persons of low rank may be powerful and influential due to their relationships with other senior people or superiors. So you need to, that's just an element, nothing too serious. Again, Arab countries, I'm not so sure about the first one, but so that the sole of one's shoes mustn't be shown. Avoid sitting so that you show the sole of your shoe. The left hand is viewed as unclean. Some of you might know why. If a woman is accepted, modest dress is appropriate. Again, just to show you about doing business in a different culture. Similarly, in Latin America, their motto is we work to live, not we live to work. Okay, and so they might be more flexible about perhaps working all hours and really pulling out all the stops. Again, here it says potential customers must develop or will want to develop a personal relationship before doing business. More flexible about time. In India, again, business people adhere to formal business traditions. Diplomacy is valued and sharing personal information is acceptable. Also, it's about building relationships. So telling them how many children you got and etc., again, is acceptable. In Russia, again, the foreigner is expected to be on time to a meeting. However, the Russian business person may be late. I'll take this with a bit of pinch of salt, all of these things. It might be changing now. This is some information I found. Having a third party introduce one in a meeting is better than self-introduction. There you go. And this is the one I found most interesting, especially the first one. It says trust and punctuality are important aspects of conducting business in South Africa. There you go. One may even be invited to someone's home during business negotiations. If so, bring a gift for the host, such as flowers. Okay, you might want to comment on that if you want, but again, don't take it too seriously. I need you all to think about the influence of culture, the impact of culture on doing business in another country. So that's what we're talking about here. So we accept that a country's culture affects attitudes to work. Management styles are also important, especially when you have perhaps host country employees. You must consider the management style. Your advertising campaigns, your communication must be carefully tailored to local cultures. Culture has an impact on communication style, Okay, so this a couple of things again. Here's another one with regard to communication. So this is US-based business jargon. Some of you might might have used it before. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. Now again, it's not to be taken literally, it's figuratively. It ain't over till the fat lady sings. Don't reinvent the wheel, etc. It's not about saying 100K. Okay? Does anybody maybe people might not understand it. A business goes belly up. In other words, it flops like a fish, when it dies. A business goes belly up. So that kind of thing. Okay, so that's all about socio-cultural aspects. Political systems, on the other hand, also influence the way business is done. There's different political systems. Democracy is about rule by the people. We talk about Athenian democracy, a pure form of democracy when all adult citizens vote directly. Representative democracies, citizens vote to elect given individuals to serve as their representatives. So something like when you vote for members of parliament, and a totalitarian government where there's no support from or consent of the citizenry. A military dictatorship is an example of a totalitarian government. So we talk about national economic ideologies. Now, economic ideologies are not so much, I mean, you might say, well, what's the link to politics or to political systems? Again, just bear with me here. It's a belief system that guides how you organize, manage, and distribute resources, balancing the role of the state and the free market. So this is important when you understand that these frameworks dictate taxation, labor laws, wealth distribution, and trade policies. So we have these three economic ideologies: socialism, communism, capitalism. Okay? In socialism, the government plays a strong role. In communism, the government or state owns all and controls all major factors of production. And all you capitalists know that in capitalism, businesses are privately owned, strong individual intent, and generally the government plays a little role in the economy. Obviously, this is pure forms of socialism, communism, and capitalism. Maybe this might be a little bit more here. Capitalism in terms of the free market and what we call neoliberalism. Minimal state intervention, prioritizing private ownership, market-driven resource allocation. In other words, it's supply and demand, the things you learned in Economics 1. Some of you might be doing Economics 3. Okay, socialism, on the other hand, advocates for collective or state ownership of major resources and means of production. So you want to reduce economic inequality by using public revenue to fund social welfare programs. Now, you could have combinations. A social democracy, a hybrid framework, combines a capitalist free market economy with a highly developed welfare state. Okay? Supporting private property and entrepreneurship, but taxing wealth and income to fund those strong social safety nets. Sweden, for example, and some of those so-called Nordic countries are very strong social democratic states. Okay? Heavily taxing wealth and income, but there's a lot of social safety in terms of free education, free higher education, free basic and for higher education, free healthcare, etc. So a welfare state in that sense, but combined with that free market economy. Oh, okay, so that's the first three again. Then communism, extreme form of socialism, and then state capitalism, a model where the state heavily directs the economy or owns major commercial enterprises, sometimes called the developmental state. Okay? So you can figure out what we got here in South Africa. So we then talk about political and economic risks and corruption. Economic risks, those uncertainties and potential losses companies face due to things such as geopolitical events or broader macroeconomic policies, and then financial shifts. So it could be restrictions on transfer or exchange of currency, devaluation of the currency. You might read about MTN, for example, and the Nigerian operations and the fact that the Naira, the Nigerian currency, was devalued and that reduced their profits, okay, when they repatriated the profits. Again, ability of the country to repay loans, inflation, corruption, HR and labor relations problems, recession risks, trade barriers, all these are risks that we talk about. Political risk can be at a micro level, micro-political, affecting an industry, or a macro-political risk, all businesses in a given country. So these are threats to a company's profitability, assets, or operations. caused by governmental actions or geopolitical events in a host country. And then they could be putting up the tax rates, for example, putting currency exchange controls, or outright expropriation, nationalizing your business, and sometimes armed conflict as well. So I found this there, 2021. These were the 10 most dangerous countries in the world, but this is probably outdated now. Okay, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, South Sudan, Yemen, Somalia. Okay, probably the Americans are using the same thing. That's why they don't want a Somalian referee to go to the World Cup. Okay, but this was the one I found a little bit concerning. 10 of the most dangerous cities in 2025. But the sad part was that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are in South Africa. I'm sure that's not true, but there we go. 5 most dangerous cities according to the crime index. Look at the crime indexes. Okay, so if you're not in any of those South African cities, here's this thing one from my friend, my chommy called ChatGPT. Highest risk countries for business: Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Venezuela, Ukraine, Mali, Nigeria, South Sudan, DRC, Libya. Again, I'm dismayed that there's so many in Africa. Here we go. This is from Pinkerton.com. Most dangerous countries for business. Again, you see them lining up: Chad, Zimbabwe, Guinea, Angola, Sierra Leone, Burundi, Mauritania, Ethiopia. Goodness, 8 out of 10 are all in Africa. Burma and Haiti after that. Serious problems. So, political risk, economic risk, we spoke about. Corruption, again, public decision. Now, the question is that in some countries, that's how business is done. Okay, bakshish if you want, or giving gifts or whatever. Not necessarily bribing, but same intent. Okay, the question is, what do you do? When in Rome, do we do as the Romans do? So when you're in another country, do you do what the locals do? Or do you do as you do at home? In France, for example, corrupt bribery is not allowed in France. But if you're a French company doing business somewhere else in the world and you resort to bribery, well, it's not the French government's business. So do as you do at home, or do as you do as the Romans do when in Rome. And then the legal environment talks to civil, common law, and theocratic law. Again, hopefully you'll remember some of your stuff from Commercial Law 201 in second year. Okay, what is civil law, common law, and theocratic law? And then criminal law. Again, what is the purpose of criminal law, or how does it impact? All right, so if you violate laws, crimes punishable by laws that is punishable by incarceration or jail time, it might have an impact on your business, your staff, for example. And there's those 2 examples. For example, that laws change. Okay, so we know, for example, now there's a relaxation on the use of marijuana, and yeah, alcohol sales at one time were prohibited. Imagine that happening now. Contract law, again, this is important because it's about governing enforceable agreements. So if you can't enforce an agreement, then it becomes meaningless. So you have to become familiar with the law in the host country, the country in which you're operating. Tax law, again, goes without saying. How government levies tax on individuals and businesses. And again, you must have knowledge of that because tax rates and regulations vary. So as part of our research into going to which countries, we will look at it. What is the tax rate in that country for corporations or for businesses? What are the exchange control regulations if we want to repatriate the profits? Okay, so again, we see tax haven countries like Mauritius, Belize, the Cayman Islands, Antigua, Barbuda, and Isle of Man, where you can have little or no tax transparency. And then importantly, antitrust laws, or competition law, if you want, designed to promote fair competition. So antitrust laws are also known as anti-monopoly laws, and you know what a monopoly is. Product safety law is important. Two aspects here. Is the burden on the buyer or the burden on the seller or the manufacturer? So caveat vendito, let the seller beware, or caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. So product safety law in some countries very strict. For example, in putting the ingredients of a food product, for example, on labeling, etc. The labelings you have on cigarettes, for example, and warning labels, etc. Now that is part of the law there in certain countries like Australia and other countries. So again, it adds to the cost of doing business, or it impacts on doing business. And then optional alternative dispute resolution. So most disputes are settled by law, okay? How disputes are settled, but there could be an alternative process like arbitration, for example. So again, it's important to say what are the mechanisms for settling dispute with regard to contracts or agreements, etc., and are there alternative dispute resolution mechanisms available? And then how do we protect our intellectual property? What is the intellectual property law? What are the IP laws there regarding patents, trademarks, copyrights, etc.? Or somebody will just copy our stuff. So it's a product of intellectual rather than physical activity. You have to protect intellectual property, and these are the three things. Patent, by patenting it, excludes others from selling, making, or using the invention for a certain period. Copyright, for example, music, etc., and poetry or whatever. And then trademark, a distinctive phrase, name, word, picture, or symbol, or design, or a combination of these. So again, when somebody has a trademark that is very similar, and the test apparently is that will the reasonable man or will the general person be confused or fooled by it thinking it's A when in fact it's B because it's so similar? And that's often the test that's used. So, questions, anybody? Let's see how many we got. 47, 46, 46. Okay, something in the chat. Ethics and governance comes in. Yes. Good evening, Chris. Yes. Okay. Yasin says all fine. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure, Cindy, at which point you were saying ethics and governance comes in. But yes, ethics and governance is just part of everything we do. You can't get away from it. But as I said previously, the whole this thing, whose ethics or who's right and wrong. Ethics enables us to distinguish between right and wrong. It's about right and wrong, but again, that might be different in different contexts or in different countries as well. So think about that as well. Ethics and governance. Yep. Let's see. Anybody got any questions? Okay. Still got a lot of time, unless you want to claim your refund for having paid for 1 hour of webinar and only getting, what is it now, 32 minutes. maybe a little bit more than 32 minutes. Yes, anybody? Yasin, Deborah, Chelsea, Chris?
Hello, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Obviously you finish early because you go through it with the fast enough, but you did ask us to read up on the handbook, so I think that is why you kind of testing us. In your experience, what we should be concentrating in the exam?
Yeah, so the exam will have case studies, obviously, okay, that will talk to different aspects. Like, for example, what would be the impact of the socio-cultural environment? Let's give you all a thing of, say, Ocean Basket preparing to open the restaurants in maybe another 19 locations around the world or something, some article that talks to that. What kind of challenges would they face, for example? But I call them risks. What kind of challenges would they face? How will the socio-cultural aspects impact? When we talk about entry strategies and global strategies, we'll talk about this thing of localization versus standardization. So one aspect of a global business is that if you can achieve a market where you sell your business, then you can achieve economies of scale, your products or services rather, you can achieve economies of scale because now you're making more. And if you remember from your economics, in the long run, fixed costs reduce. I don't expect you all to remember from 2 years ago, but trust me, it's right. So again, that means you making your costs are reduced because of economies of scale. Now, if you have to then adapt your product or service for a local market, that's referred to as localization. Okay, and localization will then mean an added cost because now you've got to adapt your product for a particular market. I use the example often of Big Mac, the McDonald's and their Big Mac beef burger. In India, they adapted it to call it a Big Mac Aloo because people don't eat beef there. Okay, so that kind of adaptation then results in a different strategy, a localization strategy as opposed to, let's say, a global standardization strategy or an international strategy. So we'll be talking about that, the cost saving as opposed to catering for local markets. And you could do both, I guess, but obviously not to the extent that each one takes priority. So to come back to your question, it's about that kind of thing, about integrating all these kinds of things, to knowing what globalization is, what the positive and negative effects of globalization, which you had some of it in your assignment, the different facets. Again, not to get a question on globalization because you had that in your assignment, but how a globally integrated market works, for example. And what do we mean by global integration? So things like your messages, your marketing messages, the way you advertise, for example, the way staff actually talk to customers in certain countries, for example, like France, if you go into a shop, you might think you're just being ignored, but the culture there or the practice there is that if somebody wants something, then they'll ask the assistant to help them. And they don't want an assistant coming and saying, how can I help you today, etc., until they are ready to seek assistance. Now, in other countries, you might think, oh, these people are just ignoring us. They don't want to serve us or whatever. Or you might say, this person is troubling me because they keep on asking me if they can help. I know what I'm looking for. When I find or when I need help, I'll ask for it. That kind of thing. But obviously at a level of strategy, why do we go international? What are the risks? What are the benefits? how do we choose a market? Okay, how do we look at the political, legal, technological, and cultural factors in terms of the impact or the cost of doing business in a particular country? All kinds of things. So hopefully that will answer your question. You notice I'm just rambling on a bit because it's still only 5 minutes later. But yes, any other questions? But I'll talk about the assessment that you'll are due to have in the last webinar. Somebody in the chat, 47 people, 46 people. Oof, okay. Low tax rate, non-high. Well, that's the best of both worlds, isn't it, Lebohan? Low tax rate, not a high-risk country, political stability, economic good, reasonable economic, not stability, but economic conditions, if you want. Yeah, so it's not about doing international business. It's just about doing business in that country. Okay, it can start off by just maybe you do some exporting or importing, and then maybe it can go to where you manufacture in another country, take advantage of location and labor and access to raw materials, etc. So you can move your manufacturing from your home country to a host country. And this is what Uncle Donald gets upset about, the fact that American jobs have gone overseas. Okay, he wants to make America great again and bring the jobs back. So an example is General Motors. You all almost heard of General Motors. At one time, the multinational car manufacturer, motor vehicle manufacturer. Everywhere in the world, you'll have heard of General Motors. In Saudi Arabia, for example, they call it a GMC. And on the front of the vehicle, it says GMC, General Motors Corporation. So General Motors went to China and had to partner, because that's the law, with a local organization there to make General Motors vehicles in China. Okay, to the extent that now those are being exported to America. So Americans can buy a General Motors car which has been made in China. So that kind of thing. So yes, a talent wants to know about unrest. Yes. No, it doesn't affect local business, not only affect local business and economy at large, because it then says that South Africa is not a place to go and do business in. So the politicians say we are open for business. They invite multinationals to come to South Africa, for example, and set up shop in South Africa. You had the case of Walmart, for example. Walmart came in here through buying a major part of Massmart. And then they came on a second time, or they changed their entry strategy and now have opened Walmart stores. So that's okay because, hey, they're not foreign nationals or undocumented foreign nationals or whatever. But it just, again, that something has to suffer. Local businesses or the economy will suffer, like we said, 10 most dangerous places. So if there's war, Somalia, Sudan, etc., that's going to affect business. Recent past exam papers. They put Adam and Eve stuff there. There's no. Okay, Nadine, I hear you. I'm not sure what exam papers have been put up. Just remember that if you're using past exam papers, then it's only part of the way you revise, because examiners change. I can tell you that my papers are very different from what was done previously. So Don't rely on past exam papers and say this came out last year or this came out this year or whatever. But use it as just part of your study, your revision, not the
Sorry,
only
sir.
form of revision you do. Yes, go ahead.
As you said, your papers are different. And obviously your paper, the question paper on our assignment was very different. It was 35 pages long.
Yeah, now
Are we in for another 35 pages?
No, not really. It'd probably be about
Like
12
what?
pages, I think. 12
No,
pages.
man.
12 to 15, yeah.
Hi, good
Okay.
evening, sir. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Nadine.
Good. So I want to ask you something. So regardless of the theory, right,
Yes.
or that we've obviously been discussing, and no
Yes.
disrespect to the module or the theory, but for me, I feel like, you know, in the real world,
Yes.
that
Okay, somebody needs to mute.
so Gav. Okay, so
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
So what I wanted to say, sir, is that yes, we are looking at the legal environment and we're looking at
Yes.
economic environment, etc., etc.
Mm.
But if we look at reality, right? So, and I want to use an actual example. When the president went overseas, right, and he met with Trump and all this stuff, it wasn't relevant about all these legal environment and that sort of thing because Johann Rupert was in the room. So I feel like international business, trading, and even local business, it's not about the theory, but you know, the networks, the connections, the you understand what I'm trying what
No,
what I'm
absolutely. That's what I referred to in those China examples. That it's about how you're able to tap into a network. So
Yeah.
again, you see, for example, that it goes if you're able to now get a contact or a connection or whatever, it then makes life easier. Okay, and that's essentially why a lot of deals are done on the golf course, because
Correct.
that's what happens. So what essentially this course is just about strategy, okay, and about
Okay.
saying, well, if we're going and we go, whether we go beyond our borders or we remain in our borders, how do we grow our business? Okay. And if we then decide we're going to grow our business by entering new markets which are across our borders or over past our borders, those are political borders, and now we're seeing more and more so-called marketing or markets as opposed to political groupings. So we're talking about, let's just say, the European market, which is the Eurozone, if you want. And again, then you say, well, we know it just becomes a little bit more complicated. We got more things to think about. But even in South Africa today, you can't say that all our markets are homogeneous. They're different. So this is just a little bit more. And then you got legal regulations which could be different from your home country regulations. So that's why we consider the legal environment, the political environment, and we think about the risks. And at the end of the day, it's about making sound decisions to pursue a strategy in terms of the vision to grow the business, etc. And we know e-commerce, some businesses are what we call born global. If you start off with not a hybrid, but just a straight online business, immediately you are accessible to the whole world. And by the same token, the whole world is your competition. So it just depends on the form that you take and all of the other things. But essentially, it comes down to strategy. Kevin, let's hear your pearls of wisdom.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to apologize for being late and to you, sir. Most
No problem.
importantly, I just came from work, but I will definitely look at this pre-recording again. But
Mhm.
while we are here, I just wanted to ask one exam question.
Sure.
So I just wanted to know what, because sometimes this riddles me with 10 more pages. So I wanted to know what exactly separates from your side a good answer from an excellent answer. Is it the more direct case facts, more examples, stronger theory, and of course, obviously, stronger theory takes into account stronger application, which can cause more pages. Or deep evaluation or
Yeah, look,
stronger
it's a
conclusion.
tough one. Let me tell you firstly that marking essays is not an objective process, it's a subjective process. Okay? So you have marking guidelines. For me, there's no such thing as a so-called model answer. It's just marking guidelines. Okay? But to take the words you said, yes. So you've responded to the requirements of the question. You put a logical argument through, you've shown using your paragraphs and the way you put your argument that you're doing this in a coherent fashion. And most importantly, you are answering the question. Okay? And there's evidence that, hey, you have looked at other things. There's also some things that you've made that perhaps are not necessarily in the, it's almost like an original thinking or some kind of innovation. But a lot of times that depends on the marker being knowledgeable about the subject area. So it's not an objective process, okay? And that's why if you're unhappy about the mark you receive or whatever, you should, I know it costs money, but you should ask for a remark if you're confident about what you've done and that you put your best effort into it. But when you also look at feedback, especially in your assignments, please take into account that it's not personal. I mean, when you do an assignment and you put all your effort into it, you sort of get very this thing about it, parochial in the sense that, hey, this belongs to me, and now this person has got the audacity to actually criticize me and say, no, I'm not right. Okay,
So,
Phineas.
sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
just I've received comments in my or feedback in my previous assignments where it was stated that I could, if I had to apply more theory and more application, the answer would have gone from good to excellent, So if I
Okay,
can
Gavin,
just
I
get a
think
clear understanding regarding that.
yeah, it's very difficult, Kevin. It's hard for me to give it to you. Uh, you must remember, and again, I've shared this with you, not to this thing or any of my colleagues or anything like that, but often when somebody has to justify why they gave you 6 out of 10 and not 7 out of 10 for a particular piece of work, then they'll say, well, insufficient application, for example, or whatever. I think you have to accept that it's not objective, but if you put your hard work into it and you feel that the comments are unfair, then you must challenge them. Not in a rude way, but just to say, look, I need to know why I did. But we do have students. I had a student who had 86% for an assignment and said, where did I lose 14 marks? And I couldn't answer that. I had to give her that same story about subjectivity and objectivity. It's impossible for me to tell you where you lost 14 marks. And nobody, in my view, can get 100% because that's a perfect answer. And there's no such thing as a perfect answer. Nadine, is the copy-paste function still working? The word on the street, Nadine. You should join the diplomatic service, Nadine. Become a diplomat. Yes, so it would appear to be people that they will certainly for the exams the copy paste function will be disabled, and I think for me that's a very good thing. Okay, and there will probably be a browser lockdown, that you'll not be able to browse on the machine that you are using to answer your paper. The snookers is yes, Nadine. But word on the street is what I was referring to. Okay, bad news travels faster, students. I had one student who was most unhappy about having heard from, he said, from a senior facilitator, wasn't me, that the copy paste function is going to be disabled and the browsers are going to be locked. And he was saying, how you expect us to answer exam papers? So that was a bit funny. Questions, anybody?
So, with regards to assignments, you said, you can't give 100% answer. Because obviously it's somebody else's understanding of a question posed, right? And then obviously you got your interpretation of the same question.
Correct.
So for maximum marks, why don't they just give us questions with definitive answers? So we could answer definitively and get maximum marks.
But but you see, this thing is this, you're looking at particularly, well, even at this level, that that's what you probably had for 2-3 years. That's why your people are spoiled. You need to know about whether people apply the stuff. This is not just about memorization and rote learning. Again, your ability to apply and to think critically. Okay. Now, a marker won't necessarily mark you down because he or she disagrees with what you are saying. Okay. If you are patently wrong, you're telling me the sun rises in the west, then that is wrong. Even though you might say that's my interpretation, that is just patently wrong. But if you're able to make an argument, okay, and that's the thing we got to do as managers. We got to treat this thing of people to be able to brainstorm and to come up with ideas and be innovative and then back up what they think they say. So I think it's not about giving definitive answers. It's about perhaps asking you if you agree and justifying or critically examining a statement like the one on franchising that you had in your assignment. It's not about saying, well, this franchising is this and that's how you must always answer. And as I told you all, there's no right or wrong answer in that entrepreneurship assignment. You have to type like a bullet train. Yes. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
In terms of a case study, right? So I know you're going to come through very strong with 5 or 6 articles. That's what I'm guessing. But is it necessary in the exam, if the question doesn't explicitly say link to the case study or drawing from examples from the case study? Because I feel like with the examinations for me, the problem has not been about what I know. The problem has been how fast I can read and type. So I can type fast, but I'm a slow reader. So can I then just cut out the articles and put my understanding of the concept of globalization and the legal environment and whatever the question is, and not speak to the case study? I don't know if my question is making sense.
No, it makes sense. So one of the things you might have heard me say is that the use of articles, a case study, whatever you want to call it, excerpts or whatever, is just about a scenario. Okay? The answers to the case study questions or the questions that follow are not necessarily found in the article, unless, as you say, it says drawing on examples from the case study or from the article. But most of the time they are theory questions that are disguised as case study questions that ask you to examine the stuff in the article and make comments on it or advise on it or something like that. Or advise on that. So what you're saying is 100%. I just fear that you mustn't go off the track, okay? You must make sure you're barking up the right tree and you're in the right forest as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And you got the right dog.
Yeah, okay. So if they okay, I'm just gonna use Toyota as an example. Let's say the case study is about Toyota.
Yes.
And they still ask about globalization or whatever, just as an example. Could I then incorporate my own example that I know of, for example, and not use anything specific to the Toyota article?
Yeah, well,
So
it
maybe
depends on the question. It depends on the question. So if the question is about how Toyota put its Toyota some philosophy into its car, this thing in let's say in Brazil, it's Toyota plant in Brazil or whatever. Again, that shouldn't be a problem because you know about it and it's what Toyota does, and they try to standardize their practices or something like that. So
yeah.
Yes, no problem with that. But
Thank
ATQ, rule number 2, answer the question.
Okay. My problem is rule number 1. There's not going to be time to read the question or read the article.
There's plenty time. Don't worry. Got plenty time. Kevin, you got the last word.
Thank you very much. So, from my side, since this is your paper, is there a possibility you can send? Is there a possibility you can send out the memo to all the markers that notifying them that full marks apply for full requirements?
Yeah, okay. So they know it won't be full requirements. What the markers are told is that they must use discretion in awarding marks. That you can't just follow the guidelines to the T. There is a place for discretionary marks. Okay. And again, if I say 3 marks for this theory or whatever, and they feel no, there was more to it than that, and they want to give 4 marks, I don't have a problem with that kind of thing.
Sir,
Deborah,
last question, sir.
No problem. 1 minute. Let me just see what Deborah's saying because I think I could answer that. Yeah. Deborah, webinar number 4 is when I do that. Okay? Which is generally learn everything. No, I promise I'll talk about the exam paper in more detail in the 4th webinar. Okay?
My last question, sir, please.
Yes, go ahead. No problem.
Looking at what you've given us in the assignment, is there a model answer paper that you have that we can look at?
For the answer for the assignment?
Yes, sir.
I got the marking guidelines.
But no,
once everybody gets the assignments back, send me an email, I'll send it to you. It won't really help because there's no question on globalization in the exam. And secondly, well, it might help for your second questions 2 and 3. No problem with that. Send me an email. Okay. I'm happy to send it.
I think we all received it as yet, but I'll send you an email.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
No problem.
Cheers, everybody.
Yeah, bye. Gav, you got your hand up still, or is it old hand?
I think that hand is old. Thank you, sorry.
No problem. No problem. Okay, everybody, keep well. I hope the Bulls win the URC. Any Bulls fans here? No? Nobody's this thing?
Yes, I'm a bull. I'm a bull.
Okay, blue bull. All right, blue.
Let's also pray for Bafana, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, no problem with that. Yes, okay. Hopefully, history will repeat itself. We'll score first, and we won't let in a goal. We'll score first, like we did in 2010, but then we let in a goal after that. Okay, y'all went around in 2010. I forgot. Sorry.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
no problem. No, it's a pleasure. Keep well, everybody. And be safe. And yeah, finish your assignment for business management and all of that. All right. You've still got the rest of the semester to go. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
21st and 23rd July. Yeah. Thanks. Bye. Stop sharing. Leave. Thank you, Lebohang.